Well, hey, everybody, it is Lisa, and I'm so glad you're back for another episode of the podcast. I have a special guest for you today, and we're getting into the holiday season. I think all of us have a lot of different ideas and thoughts about the holidays, but overall, I think it can be a little bit stressful. So I'm really hoping that Julie Drake, who's here with us today, can shed some light on how we can manage ourselves and that holiday stress during this season, which is supposed to be one of peace and joy. But might
Yes.
not always be. So I'm so glad you've joined us today. I want to introduce Julie Drake. She has been an entrepreneur since 2003, and she's a wife and mother of two amazing kids. She is certified in several emotional release methods as well as biofeedback, and she's the co founder of Advanced Innergy, which is an alternative wellness center located in Peoria, Illinois. When she works with clients, she can use a combination of all of those things or just a couple of them, but she loves to solve curious connections between the brain and body. Wow. She has helped over 100 clients achieve results both mentally and physically as they free themselves from internal holds of trapped emotions, limiting beliefs, and energetic blocks. Her passions are helping others succeed, watching her kids do what lights them up, and training any one of her three dogs. You can find Julie on Instagram at the.Julie Drake. And Julie, I'm so glad you're here with us today. I'm super excited to talk with you about just maintaining that sense of peace and calm, especially during the
Mm.
holidays, which as moms and as parents and wives, it feels like the bulk of the magic making falls on our shoulders. And I don't know about anybody else, but magic making is not my first gift. It might not be my zone of genius at all. So it feels like all this pressure. But you're going to tell us a couple of techniques, simple, affordable, actionable techniques that all of us can do to help. But first of all, I'd love for you to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself. You are telling me a little bit about your story and how you got into this.
Mhm.
And then I would love for you to define emotional release because I think we hear
Mhm.
that term floating around a lot, like in magazines and books and even maybe podcasts. And it can mean a lot of things to many different people. So, do you mind starting
Yeah.
there? That was like a whole lot to have you start with.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you're here.
So sure, it's so good to be here, Lisa. And I'll start with your first question was how did I even get into this?
Yeah.
And I really had a pandemic pivot in my life. I have been an entrepreneur, like you said, for a long time in the technology space, in the phone system space, very nuts and bolts, very, scientific, very physical. And then during the pandemic, I was sitting in my little reading chair in my little nook in my house and reading my Bible. And I just heard this, how the Lord speaks to you sometimes. And I heard, heal my people. And I remember sitting back and going, huh? I, we're in a pandemic. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. What did that mean? And I
Um,
have it highlighted in question marks in big circles in my Bible going, I need a little bit more, Lord. I don't understand that. So
mm,
I did sit with it for a little bit, but not long because I'm one of those that if I get a directive, it's like, how can I make that happen? What am I supposed to do? So I started sitting with it, praying with it, journaling about it, and it really drew me to get certified in some of the ways I had been helped. My journey was as an entrepreneur, I was really stuck. Like
mm,
I'd never been in my entrepreneurial life. And I hired several coaches. I was doing the things they said to do, but nothing was resulting in getting me out of this quicksand I felt like I was in. And until I connected the dots between some emotional traumas I had as a child and my parents' divorce, some of the lingering limiting beliefs I had, when I started uncovering that and releasing it with certain methods, then things started clicking. The activities that my coaches told me to do were now resulting in things. And the more I learned about it, the more light bulbs were just going off right and left. I don't know if you've had that happen, Lisa, where it's like you think you're supposed to go a direction and then it's confirmation. I call them God drop moments. It's
mm.
like everywhere stuff was happening. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll go get certified. So that's what I did. And when I talk about emotional release, I really think of it as, we are called to take captive things that are in our minds.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense to me really until I started going through this. And, I realized that I'd let emotions like ping pong me around for most of my life. It's like, oh, I feel this way. I got to go this way and I
Yeah.
got to go that way. And then I thought, no, I don't need to believe everything that comes into my mind. I don't need to do this. So I did learn to take hold of those things, to journal about them, to write them down, and to use certain methods that I had learned and that I now teach my clients and use in my client appointments to release the hold that those emotions have. Your body is an amazing design. And it really does know where those things are stored, how that's playing out in the body. And all of us have these energetic centers, these energy paths through our body. It's the way we were made. And I equate it to like your house.
Mhm.
Everybody understands their house has wires and it goes to a central panel. And that's really how our energy centers in our body work. But sometimes the energy centers get gummed up.
Yeah.
Just like if you plug in a hair dryer and a vacuum and a whatever in your house and the house wiring goes,
Yeah.
the circuit blows because
Yeah.
it's like overload, overload. That happens in our minds and bodies too. We just don't equate it to the same thing because it comes across as mental problems, anger, rage, depression, anxiety, or physical pain, back pain, hip pain,
Mhm.
knee pain, and we're like, we're broken physically
Mhm.
or mentally. But are we really? Or is it just something that we have to unstick
Mhm.
in our bodies or our minds to let
Yeah.
that energy center flow
Mhm.
differently?
Yeah.
And that's what I found in my life and with the clients that I work with.
Well, that is a whole lot right there. I mean, we could do have you read the book, The Body Keeps Score? Um,
Yes,
I think that's a
I love
really
that book.
it's an amazing book that really talks about how we don't physically forget things. Our body does keep track of it, and we can get in
Yeah.
stuck places. So I love this idea of emotional release is just really helping your neural pathways work and function the way that they're
Hmm.
created to function. And we live in a fallen,
Exactly.
broken world, and so it's easy to, accidents, trauma, all those kind of things can really gum
Hmm.
that up. So great definition.
Right.
I love that. So tell us, so do you work with people who are stressed out all the time or they come to you in pain or why do people seek you out?
All of the above. All of the above. I have had people come to me with physical pain that they're hoping to get rid of.
Mm.
I have people come to me because, they're angry all the time or they want different dynamics in their relationships, whether that be a professional. I have people come to me because they can't achieve the goals they keep setting. They keep making goals over and over again and not achieving them. And so it's a number of reasons. But the funny thing is, I just had a client say this to me the other day. She came to me because of the dynamic between her and her kids. She would
Mhm.
have these angry outbursts, and she didn't like that she did that. So
Yeah.
we were working on those triggers. But at the same time, she had hip pain. And she realized just last week when she went to a chiropractor appointment, the chiropractor said, "Okay, are we working on the same thing?" And she's like, that pain is gone. And
Interesting.
so
Huh.
even though she didn't come to me for that, it was a byproduct of that emotional release, getting
Yeah.
rid of some of that gummed up stuff.
Mhm.
And oftentimes I have that happen. Another client of mine came to me specifically for
Mm.
knee pain and had such a tremendous release in the knee pain and realized all of the emotional triggers that we
Mhm.
found associated with that and thought, what else can I accomplish? So we've
Yeah,
just been
exactly.
working on things, different things. So
Yeah.
it's for all sorts of reasons
Yeah.
that people come to see me.
Very interesting. I love it. Well, we're going to talk about holiday stress because we're coming into the holiday season.
Mhm.
And, I've already been putting out Thanksgiving memes and stuff and getting great responses. Like, we all know it's coming. And I think maybe there's a little bit more stress than normal, although I don't know what that normal is. But inflation's
Right.
happening and people are worried about the economy and that kind of thing. But give us some quick and
Mhm.
easy tips that all of us can do that can help us just be aware of and maybe alleviate some of that stress.
So I want to build on something you said earlier because we as women I think we build such a high expectation in our own minds of what the holidays should be
Yeah. Yeah.
that before I even get into my tips, I want to give everybody permission to release that, because I think if we take that simple step of not having the perfect holiday, but having a connected holiday,
Yeah.
and just release those high expectations and just, have a simple goal of getting through the holidays with, a little bit of joy, a little bit of
Um,
connection, and taking the pressure off sometimes of having that perfect, women's world, or, whatever the
yeah.
magazine tells us our holiday should look like or be like. I
Yeah.
think that's important too. But
Mhm.
to your point, I do want to say, holidays should be a joyous time, but there are people that have lost loved ones that
Yeah,
the holidays bring up, grief and loss,
for
or
sure.
maybe their holidays have not been joyful. And
Yeah.
so there are triggers that come up. And even leading into the season, even right now, weeks before a holiday happens, you could be noticing that you are set off more easily, or you're sad, um, crying more easily, and you don't understand the correlation,
Yeah.
because it's not that holiday yet. But again, the body does keep score, Lisa, and the body knows what's coming, and it's already starting to prepare or brace itself
Yeah.
for what it's going to have to deal with. So the
Yeah.
mind starts working, and our body's whole job is protection.
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes the protection comes in a form that doesn't serve us. It
Mm.
doesn't understand that that protection is doing us a disservice. So what I encourage people to do is really pay attention. Am I more weepy? Am I more angry? Am I, exploding at things that I normally wouldn't? And start to, even in your phone. I mean, I take so many notes in my phone. It's like, this happened today, question mark, question mark. And
Interesting.
then go back and look at, because we can dissolve the triggers.
Yeah.
I have a mini course launching in December. And one of the things I'm going to show people is really how to not only identify those, but dissolve them.
Mhm.
And whether you work with me personally, this is a tool that can be used, because you really want to identify as much as possible where you think that could be coming from. Identify any emotions that come up. Just sit with it for a minute. And I want to be clear, Lisa, this doesn't mean reliving the event,
Yeah.
because the work that I do not have clients relive any event.
Hmm.
It's not necessary to identify the emotion and release it. We're really just bringing it, kind of like when we cook. That soup, it stuff just comes up to the surface
Yeah.
of the water,
Yeah.
and then you like skim it off. And
Yeah.
that's what this is like.
Yeah.
You don't want to like dig in the gunk.
Yeah.
You just want to skim it off and say, thank you for
Yeah.
showing me that this is happening. But one of the tools that I use and I teach people is tapping.
Mhm.
And some people are neurosensitive to tapping. So I would say use it as a mental visual release. If you get stimulated adversely to touching, there are ways to do this as a mental exercise rather than a physical. But even leading into, this time of year, let's say sadness is a thing, or loneliness. There are people that have gone through divorces, and
Yeah.
they are not with their family anymore on the holidays, and that is very lonely. It
Yeah.
feels hard. It feels like they won't get through it. So I encourage and I teach my clients to use their own words, but to tap on those energy centers, because it's all about creating a flow. And
Hmm.
it seems counterintuitive if you have belly pain, or if you have hip pain or knee pain, but there are spots like above the eye, next to the eye, under the nose, under the mouth, and then the collarbone or the thalamus right here, and then the top of the head.
Mm.
Those are centers that really send signals to your body that, okay, I can let this go. I can release what is being held in the body. And you just start talking. And obviously, you're in front of a bunch of people, probably not a good thing. But I even do this in the car sometimes. I'll just use this part. This is my go-to. But to tap through and say, this season, it's so lonely. I never wanted this to happen. This wasn't my plan. And to go through and just talk through those feelings.
Yeah.
But the key is also at the end to end with a more positive round of, you know, even though I'm alone, maybe it's not going to be so bad this year. Maybe I can get lost in the Hallmark movies. Maybe I can write a story. Maybe I can set a new tradition. You know, it's not going to be as bad this year.
Yeah.
And you can just feel the release and the calm come over you.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes we're in positions where we feel that buildup, that emotion is building and it's sad. We feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it any minute. Either get mad or get sad and start crying at the wrong moment.
Yeah.
There are finger points that under a table, you're at a dinner table with your whole family, and all of a sudden you're like, don't do it, don't do it. But you can start tapping on your fingers.
Oh,
you know, just tap on the sides of the fingers, put your hands on the table. Oh, never know. And just start playing that in your mind, you know, go through the same exercise quietly or remove yourself and excuse yourself to go to the restroom. Even a couple minutes of doing that changes the whole energetic dynamic in your body. Yeah. And it's amazing what can happen if you start using that tool.
I love how you're reframing for yourself as you tap the story that you feel like you're stuck in versus what maybe could possibly happen instead. I mean, that's just really powerful. We don't have to stay in the story we find ourselves. We can recreate and reframe for ourselves. That's a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing leading up to something like that is really it's setting up emotional barriers. It's setting up those boundaries for ourselves. And if a holiday situation has always produced a certain result for you, one of the things that you can do is go down the what if this happens path. You know, what if this happens? What's the worst that could happen? And what if this happens? What's the worst? And just kind of reframe that. I talk to my daughter a lot about this because she is one that goes into a new situation. She's always like, what if? And it's always the worst thing. And I'm like, but what if this happens instead? Yeah. She goes, what do you mean? I'm like, what if this could happen instead? And sometimes I think that we've all heard of self-fulfilling prophecies or, you know, that type of thing. If we are intending a certain result, oftentimes we're going to find it. I call them heat-seeking missiles. Like our brain is constantly looking for that, and it's going to find it. It's going to pull it. It doesn't matter what happens. It's going to create the situation somehow. But if we can reframe our intention and we can go into a situation like, maybe that could be different this year. You know, maybe so-and-so doesn't have the same impact on me as they always have.
I love how this is
I think that's our responsibility.
Yeah, I love how this is. I don't really like that whole idea that that law of attraction. That's not really appealing to me, but I love the idea of expecting serendipity and for the good things in the world and God to be on your team and show up for you in every situation. And that's really what you're talking about is instead of feeling like, okay, this happened and it was a bad thing and it's sad and I'm just going to sleep away the holidays. Maybe God's going to make a new path for me. And that just, oh, wow, it just changes everything, doesn't it? That's just such a beautiful way to think about it. Yeah.
And I often find that emotional release allows us to see those opportunities, see those little glimmers that God is doing around us that we might have been there, but we weren't seeing them.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, and sometimes I think God lifts the veil at the right time. I think of, you know, even Jesus walking alongside, you know, after the resurrection, and some people saw him and some people didn't. And he was walking along the road with two of them. And it's like all of a sudden they knew it was him, but they couldn't see him in the beginning. I think that those moments happen to us because we're just not ready yet. But yet 5 minutes from now, we could be ready.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I love that.
I really want to talk to, I do want to address something because, you know, we all have those situations where we are in environments maybe with people that trigger us or have hurt us in some way. It could have even been a small hurt, but it's a lingering resentment, or a situation that we can't say no to. And I want to remind people of two things. Number one, we can say no, and we don't have to have an explanation. Just can't make it this year. I'm so sorry. It's okay. Or what we can do. And it's like, give yourself permission to say no. I think sometimes we feel like we have to say yes to everything and everybody. And that's not true. We have to remember that. But if we can't say no for whatever reason, or we haven't said no, we can still set up an energetic barrier. And I talk to my clients about this, and there's really two ways to do that. One is to imagine, if you will, a shield. It can be a specific color that you love, or it could be a type of material that you love. I had somebody build it out of diamonds one time. I'm like, ooh, I like that. Glittery and protective and hard. It's like a hard coating between you and that outside world. Or really put on those pieces of armor that God talks about in Ephesians. Put on intentionally the armor of God and really visually imagine all of those pieces coming into place before you enter a potential situation. Because that really does, we talk about intention, and that's one of the things that we can do for ourselves to make sure that we're going in with that barrier up. Call it a spiritual barrier, an energetic barrier, whatever. But it does work if you practice it. And sometimes I think people think, that doesn't work. It takes practice. It's something new. And it does work if you learn the skill of doing it. And sometimes I'll even set a reminder, remember to put up your shield before, going here.
I love it.
Because I know.
There's going to be certain situations. I love that idea because it really helps us be proactive about protecting ourselves. And I think for some of us, when we have a servant heart, or we're a pleaser personality, or we want everybody to get along and we're peacemakers, we forget that having clear boundaries is just part of good mental health and spiritual health and all the health. And that it's totally okay to be proactively thinking about what kind of protective gear do I need to put on? And I mean, it's not like you have to protect yourself from everybody. I don't mean it in some kind of like paranoid way. I'm just saying, we just know that certain interactions with certain people are going to yield certain results in our lives, right? Like, we know that some people are going to always like just try to take a little bit of advantage of us, or, or whatever. And so I think being really intentional and being proactive about it just helps us be able to interact with people in a way that's so loving and kind, and yet still helps us keep our own personal integrity at the end of the day. That's the win for everybody. That's just a win-win.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we leave that environment feeling so different than we had been because we took the time to do our self-care, our self-preservation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I love
Another way that I do that, staying calm is my kids hate when I say this, but stress is a choice. And I've proven this to myself over and over again. I used to think stress is everywhere. I can't avoid it. And you're never going to get to we're all human, right? The initial stress feeling is normal. It is expected. We're never going to get to a spot where we won't feel angry. We won't feel sad. We won't feel stressed in the moment. But I think that the choice comes in how long we let it linger, how we let it stay. If somebody knocks at our door, if they're an unwanted guest, they're not coming in. Or if we find them to be somebody that we don't want to interact with, they're not getting in often and they're not staying long. But yet we allow all these things to come on us and we keep them there because we feel like they're there. And that's what I want my clients to know. That's what I want, your audience to know is it's a choice. It doesn't have to stay. One of the other ways that's really easy to take with you is essential oils. And there are specific oils for specific things, the stress and overwhelm, the loneliness and grief, even dynamics with family, mothers or fathers. There are specific oils that resonate with the mind and body. And so I have a roller that I keep with me all the time that has a blend of it. I use doTERRA, but you can find, it's just a calming blend is
Yeah.
what I'm looking for. And just keep it with you and roll it on like perfume before you go to an event. Make sure that you have it with you. Put it all over your wrist, your heart space, and really just breathe it in. We talk about breathing because breathing is super important, but breathing in essential oils, there's something about that smell to amygdala. It's that little spot in our brain that
Yeah.
controls our emotional responses
Yeah.
that can really like calm you in the moment.
Yeah.
And, take a moment before you enter a situation. Or, like I said, if you're triggered, go to your purse, roll something on, and go to the restroom
Yeah.
and take a moment and really take a deep breath in, like a true 5 count, and hold it for 5 and then slowly release it, like add a second or two on the release. It is amazing what the body can do. And take it a really deep belly breath, not a real shallow breath. And combining that with essential oils in the moment, it's like you are a new person.
Yeah.
And people are gonna be like, oh, you're so calm. How do you do that? You know, like, well, yeah, it's a choice.
Yeah.
I didn't change the stress factors around me. I'm just changing how I respond to them and how long I let them linger in my
Hmm.
space.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, I love the idea of breathing deeply. I mean, we've done that in our own home. I used to tell my kids, I want to see your toes breathing, like take in that breath as
I love
deeply and
that.
hold it as long as you can. And now they kind of use that phrase on me, which I'm like, don't quote me,
Turn
don't
around.
use my own. But it really does help you like just pause and be able to reset a little bit. Like you don't have to be
Hmm.
so immediate in your responses
Right.
or how you come back. You can just pause and breathe and calmly think about it. And yeah, some of these essential
Yeah.
oils are so good and helpful. And we're not promoting a certain brand. I know you probably have one in
Right.
your office and that kind of thing, but you can get them at health food stores. And
Hmm.
like anything, just check the ingredients.
Right.
Where are they
Yes,
coming from and all that kind
exactly.
of stuff. Um,
Right.
the other thing I just would want to say is like be careful about putting oils on really young kids because their skin is so porous and it can cause burns. So just my little disclaimer there. But yeah,
Well, there are great, oh, sorry, Lisa. I just wanted to share, there's great dilution ratios online.
okay.
Pinterest
Oh,
even
good.
has them. It really is, if you take a lot of carrier oil and just do a drop of oil, you can use it on a small child, but
Okay.
definitely even have them smell it, because sometimes I found that if they're real adverse to it, they
Yeah.
know it's not an oil but if they're like, oh, in the moment. But yes, you definitely want to make sure that the ratio that you're using, you don't ever want to put straight oil from a bottle onto a small child, but you can dilute it. It's like with pets, you can dilute a lot of oils, but there are definitely oils for different, pets that you want to make sure, I don't know how I got to pets because I use them with my pets. And I'm just sure that, follow a good vet that knows, which ones are, trouble. But the same thing with kids, you just want to make sure that that dilution ratio,
Mhm.
I'll drop like half of oil and half of carrier oil in a roller for me. But if I was rolling it for a small child, it would be like 3/4 of oil and a drop or two of the essential oil, just
Yeah.
to make sure, like you said, that you're being very careful with that younger child for
Yeah.
sure. And also to diffuse it is good too, because
Yeah.
then it's
Right.
naturally with all of the water.
Yeah.
And you can even diffuse oils in your home. I
Yeah.
love like the holiday blends because they
Hmm.
have a lot of trees are in those grounding oils and those
Yeah.
holidays. You smell the evergreens, but
Yeah.
there's something so grounding about those that you're getting the benefit of
Yeah.
the calm with the smell of the season,
Yeah.
and your kids don't even know what you're doing. You're like,
Right.
oh, doesn't it smell good? And you're like,
Yeah.
ooh, this has emotional properties too.
It
They don't know.
does.
They're
And
like,
it
oh,
just
it
takes
smells
you
like Christmas.
And it takes you on those great hikes you had when you were young and just hiked up a mountain and didn't even think
Yes,
about it, right? I love a lot of what you're
yes.
talking about is really you're disrupting. You're disrupting this sense of
Hmm.
urgency or stress or I have to make this happen.
Right.
You're just doing something that's a little disruptive so that your brain can reset and you can make a
Yes.
qualified choice. And I think when we're really reactive, we're not qualifying our choices. We're just,
No.
we're just doing the splatter effect. And this is really what you're really talking about is like growing up. We all have
Yeah,
to
and
like,
putting things in perspective, I think,
yeah,
like you
yeah,
said, it really is choosing different things. Grandma might have had 16 different foods at a holiday. Well, grandma didn't work and grandma didn't homeschool her kids and grandma didn't, whatever.
yeah,
So maybe you have six of the family's favorite foods and that's okay. you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's okay.
A friend of mine told me a couple years ago, this was like a complete paradigm shift for me because my grandma did have 16 foods. I mean, that was her like love
Hmm.
language, that was her craft, and everybody
Yeah,
knew it. She was renowned for her food. And somebody said, on holidays, my mom had a meat and a salad. And I was like, Shazam.
exactly. Yeah,
Well, why
exactly.
didn't I
Yes.
think of that? It's so simple, but
Yeah.
we do get into these grooves about what should
Hmm.
have, and we have so much freedom
Right.
to really like you're just sitting in your chair and you have this epiphany. You had so much freedom to really sit
Hmm.
with that and see what God wanted for you in that. And
Right.
sometimes traditions really serve us well, and sometimes they don't at all. So I think doing
Exactly.
some of these things can be really helpful as we're really trying to follow the Lord, see what's going to really serve our families, and how can we create these places of peace and joy for ourselves and our
Yes.
family, the people we love. So
Right.
important.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I think we oftentimes try to please everybody else, though, with
yeah,
those traditions and that peace and joy that we forget that we owe it to ourselves to create that too.
yeah,
And if something is not serving you,
yeah,
um, maybe look at a different way to do it that will create peace for you and your family.
yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
a big key.
Yeah. So anything, okay, this was so much great information. I feel like we could just talk for a really long time. Anything else you want to share as we're going into what could be a stressful holiday season? I guess I just want to challenge everybody who's listening to really think through like what's going to really make it a joyful holiday where you can really have connections. I love what you said. I wrote that down. Not having a perfect holiday, but having a connected holiday. That's a beautiful
Yeah.
goal. I think we can all get behind that.
Yes, 100%. And I would just say if somebody wants to dive a little bit deeper into this,
Yeah.
Lisa, I think you're going to share the link to my
Yes.
mini course.
Absolutely.
It's just three short lessons where I go a little bit deeper into the methods that I share here, give a little bit more tutorials on techniques that they can use in their own time, in their own space,
Mhm.
because it really is a skill that
Yeah.
can be learned.
Yeah, exactly. I think some of us feel like we might not have learned it or we don't feel like we react really well and we're like, well, we missed that boat. Like we didn't learn grammar in fifth
Yeah,
grade, so now we don't know grammar. Well, you can always go back and learn
right.
it. And that's
Yes,
emotional
exactly.
intelligence too. I mean, some people are more naturally gifted in emotional intelligence and they just seem to have it all together. But there are skills you can learn to become emotionally intelligent. And
Right.
it's going to help you and help other people as well. I'm absolutely going to list the mini course for you on YouTube and in our show notes at the podcast. But Julie, where can people find you at on social media or your website? We'd love to hear.
Yes, on Instagram, I am the.Julie Drake, and
Mhm.
I'm also on Facebook under Julie Drake. So either one of those places is a really great way to find me and connect with me.
Yeah, and I'll put those in the show notes too, so you guys can find her. If you guys have any questions for Julie or about this episode, we would love to hear from you. You can leave them in the comments or shoot us a DM, and I'll make sure if I can't answer them or know where to find them on Julie's information, I will send them to her, and you'll hear back from her in some way. So, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Be sure to like, share, and again, we would love to hear from you, Julie. Thank you so much for coming on today. This
Thank
was
you.
super fun and enjoyable. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I love your peaceful presence. You really exude just a
Oh,
sense of
thank you.
peace and calm, and that's just so fun. So thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much
much.
for having me. I've loved being here.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. We'll talk to you at the next podcast. Bye, everybody.
Bye.